Acumen means the skill of making good decisions and correct judgments. It usually comes with years of experience and is limited to one's own field. But what if we could improve our acumen in key areas that usually take time, such as business and leadership, by learning from others? That's where this talk show comes in. Listen, learn from, and be inspired by C-suite executives, founders, and other leaders who have been where you are now before. I'm Dror Wayne, your host in Tel Aviv, and this is Acumen. US-born, Israel-based investor and advisor Ariel Menche is the CEO of Raftel Strategy, a strategic financial consulting firm serving international clients but based out of Tel Aviv. Before Raftel, Ariel worked at KPMG and then WWE. I've brought him on the show because his field, FP&A or financial planning and analysis, is totally different to mine and most of my guests. Ariel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Dror.
I want to jump straight into that question on FP&A. Why is FP&A important? And the reason I ask this is because a founder with a good head, in my opinion, can look after a business. You take the revenue, you minus the costs, and you make sure the resulting number is black. So where does FP&A come in, and why is it an important investment?
So it's a great question, and it has different answers for different stage companies. While I don't think, as a consultant, I could go into a business and know any founder's business better than their own. The FP&A practice is extremely important to kind of level head or level set the founder and the team. So let's just take a step back. And what does FP&A provide, and where does it sit within an organization? Usually you have a CFO, and the CFO is going to wear three hats, and those hats are expanding today, but in traditional sense, there's three hats. There's accounting, which is going to look back into the past and make sure everything is reconciled until today. There's treasury, which is going to see where cash is and how it's spending and how it's coming in and making sure that it's growing with the market and making sure it's just not losing value. And then you have FP&A. FP&A is the forward-looking. Now that I have the data from accounting, from all the other systems within the company, how do we know what the company is going to do in the future, and how do we plan around it? So FP&A will take the past and apply the qualitative strategic thinking that the C-suite will do, and then apply it into a quantitative model that will project out to the future. And so a good FP&A team will be able to take strategy in order to drive decisions for the C-suite that creates tremendous value for the company.
Fantastic. It's interesting because I always think of this as that's CEO responsibility. It's CEO responsibility to know where the future of the company is, to know that the company is in a healthy position, and to know that it has a financially stable future.
So when the CEO is head of an organization, where are they getting the information from? Who's providing them with the dashboards, with the KPIs, which are key performance indicators within the company? How are they the ones to make sure that all the data is correct, the quality is aligned or ensured? So you would find the FP&A team is going to be the team that is going to be talking to the different business leaders within the organization, give a kind of a good pulse on how everyone's doing, where they're tracking with their own budgets, and be able to consolidate those reports, provide it to the CFO or directly to the CEO. I like to think of the FP&A team as a bit of a nucleus within a company. I think of it also as a service within a company. And a good FP&A team will treat each of the business leaders, whether that's head of marketing, head of sales, head of tech, the CTO, CIO, as their quote-unquote clients within the organization, be able to help them succeed where they need to succeed from a budgeting and financial standpoint, and then also be the eyes and ears of the CEO and the CFO within the organization.
That's really, really interesting. Really interesting way of thinking about it, that the FP&A team relates to everyone else as their clients. And I think actually that's something you could take into any business, cross-functionally, how we look at different departments, because you often hear about sales versus marketing or design versus copy or different functions clashing over different things. But when you start looking at other functions as your clients, as you're there to serve them, that changes everything. And that could really make for a much more collaborative company, collaborative environment, and more success. So I want to bring you on to one of my questions, which I ask in every episode, but I think this is going to be a really interesting one because, as I said, it's totally different. What makes good business? What makes good business from your perspective in FP&A and in all these things? Whereas, usually I've discussed this on the show from a sales, marketing, customer service standpoint. So what does good business mean to you?
So I do want to reframe that the FP&A perspective, my FP&A perspective is very much a strategy perspective, because you can't divorce the two, because if without strategy, FP&A is just setting up a budget going forward, which is what I would find a lot of, I would say inexperienced, but underdeveloped FP&A teams are really just setting up budgets and they're not thinking about the strategy. So from a strategic perspective, to answer your question, you want persistent differential returns. That's really what it all comes down to. And to say that in layman terms, you want to have cash coming in with a moat around it. And I use the term moat as Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett would say that, meaning that something's protecting your margins. If you're not focused on that moat aspect and you're just focusing on the margins, you're going to end up with a zero-sum game where competition can come in and just reduce your margins down with lower pricing and everything. And you basically don't really have a good business. So the good business is that persistent differential returns, those margins with a moat.
Okay, so if you could put that into practical examples for our listeners, who could be anywhere in SaaS or tech, they could also be in brick and mortar businesses. If good business is having margins with a moat around them, how do I build a moat? What does a moat mean?
This is a great question. So there's a really good book that I've read over the past, I think it's about a year ago at this point, called 7 Powers by Hamilton Helmer, which took this idea of the moat, which has been around for quite a while, and really applied like an academic perspective on it. And he took, well, I think the most innovative thing that Helmer did in this book is he took strategy and split it into 2 different categories, the dynamics and the statics. The dynamics are getting there, and the statics are being there. And in our terms, statics are, the dynamics are, what strategy do I take to get to my good business? And the statics, the being there is, what is a good business? What is this exactly? What is this business with a moat? And he identified, and he called that power. When you have persistent differential returns, that means you have power. And he identified 7 different powers that exist, and that's it. If you could find out an eighth, he said to reach out to him. And it comes down to a different business. I could go through the 7 powers, but let's say for a SaaS company, it could be a network economies or a scale economy. So a scale economies would be for every incremental offering that I give or to my clients, the cost for me on a per user basis is so minuscule that I could just start pumping this stuff out. The example they give in the book is Netflix. They have such a large user base that producing out new content would just be, that cost is spread off across that whole user base. They have that moat. They have that user base that no one else could really get in on it. And so when you're talking about these SaaS companies, if they have a large enough user base, they could start especially pumping out all these features that their competitors can't do at that scale because they don't have that user base to print it off of. Another great example would be brand, right? A company with a strong brand, like you could think of a Nike or LVMH, and they're able to produce the prices, not produce, but they're able to demand the prices that they do because of that brand power. And no one could really get into that brand power unless they spend years and years developing their own brand to get to that point.
But if I were to say to you that's all well and good, but if we take Blockbuster as an example to contrast Netflix, they had a massive user base. I can take Toys R Us. They had a huge brand, and many other top high street names, really strong brands, big companies, successful companies 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, and they're not here today.
Yeah, that's a great example. I love it because one of the 7 powers is actually called counterpositioning. And so a counterpositioning is when you basically go against an incumbent in the market and you're able to produce either the good differently, have a different go-to-market strategy, go different approach that is in a way that the incumbent cannot or will not do. And the reason why companies won't follow through is a number of issues. One exciting one is like an agency issue. No one is going to fire the CEO for, people could very much fire a CEO for taking on a new approach to a market, which, it's like, my business is fine today. Why would I try to change? So there's no incentive internally to actually make those changes.
Right, because if they take the risk, the CEO goes out and he says, If Blockbuster CEO had said, yeah, I'm going to invest all in on Netflix, and he had lost, loads of money on that, and the share prices had gone down, et cetera, he would have personally been accountable for that. Whereas not making a change, you're not really accountable personally.
Right. But to answer your question, you have a moat for a while, but markets do change. And so you always have to think about maintaining that moat. And that's always a business challenge. But once you have that moat, I would consider that a good business. Was Blockbuster a good business? I think, I haven't done the pure analysis on whether or not it really had a moat, but I think it did for a while. But the important thing there is that, they might not have had a moat, because I remember growing up, there was Hollywood videos versus Blockbuster videos, and no one really cared which one you went to, because there wasn't a real brand associated with Blockbuster, and I could have gone to the Netflix DVD. So maybe what they had was just operational excellence, and so they were just a business that had grown, but they didn't really have a moat. Maybe that's really what it was.
So you're saying maybe they actually didn't have a moat, although they had something of a brand. They had margins. And they were succeeding, but they didn't have something defending that.
So let me talk about the brand for a second, because they did have a brand, but was their brand an actual power? I think that's let's distill it down to that. Would you have paid more to rent a video from Blockbuster than from renting a video from your local no-name shop?
I see that.
Right?
I see that. People do pay more for Hollister, for Nike, for Boss, for whatever it is, than they do for Fox.
Right. For a power to be a power.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Many people actually, I'm like, why would you, every single thing they wear has a Nike logo. I'm like, why? But the fact is it works.
Of course. And by the way, Nike, what's interesting doesn't increase their prices as much as they could. Their prices are actually relatively low to the brand power they have. And I definitely do believe that Nike has a brand power. But to go back to the definition of what a power is, it needs both a benefit and a barrier. So if you're not really receiving a benefit from that brand, it's not a moat. Okay,
and the barrier? What's the barrier?
The barrier is what's keeping other people from doing the same thing. That's the moat aspect, right? In the case of branding, there's a delay of time that it takes for someone else to build up a brand to catch up, and I think that would be a big enough moat.
That makes sense.
Hysteresis, I think, is the technical term.
Once again, what was that?
Hysteresis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but
I haven't heard of it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then just the last one on this topic then before we move slightly on. For a smaller business, a more brick and mortar business who's not a SaaS business, the example I often give on this show is a bar on Dizengoff, which is your classic Tel Avivian. I want to open a business. Yeah, let's all put some money and we open a bar on Dizengoff. And it's like the worst business there is, and everyone closes every 5 minutes. But I
think you maybe answered your own question there.
All right, but how does your brick and mortar business, and it might not be that, it might be your family dry cleaners, or a small regular. It's not a SaaS. It's not a tech company which has the that option to scale in that way with low costs. How do they, if they can, build a moat? So.
Before we talk about the moat in those cases, let's talk about there's two major transitions companies will make throughout their life cycle. The first one is to get towards product market fit, right? Once you have that product market fit, that means you're able to basically you have a validated business, and you're able to generate income and cash flow on a significant amount or significant way. So when you have these bars opening on Dizengoff, if they have like a good product market fit, let's say Spice House, right?
Right. So Spice House, for those who don't know, is as you walk past, it's in many ways looks like all the other bars in Tel Aviv, but their unique thing is their cocktails, and they've got a lot of brand because they sell those cocktails also as packages to take home.
Right, which was actually a COVID transition that they made.
Okay.
And I think it worked out very well. I mean, I know if I order on Walt some Spice House cocktails, it's coming within 10 minutes. It's amazing. I live in the neighborhood. But let's talk about Spice House for a second, right? When they first started out, they were like, okay, we're going to do cocktails. That's going to be something that we're doing a little bit differently. And they did it really well. They executed very well. And so because they executed well and there's a market for it, they had product market fit, right? What's their moat now? I think their moat is their brand. I think you do pay a little bit more for those cocktails. And does it need to be the biggest moat in the whole world for it to be a good business? No, but I think what you really measure businesses on, at the end of the day, is cash flow. Right? If you have a positive cash flow, that's a business that's worthwhile. Think from a valuation perspective, and those cash flows are predictable in the future. That's what That's what it comes down to.
And you've just led me straight into the next topic I want to ask you about, which is planning towards an exit. Because I know in terms of strategy consulting, that's probably a lot of what you talk about and helping people move to it, especially in a financial perspective and keeping the books healthy and all that sort of stuff. So I want to ask, for founders or CEOs, business owners, whoever it may be, how do they plan towards an exit, whether it's private equity or otherwise? And when should they start? Should they be starting to plan for it very early on? Is that a distraction from actually doing good business? Or is it a good practice to be planning a little bit so that there is some kind of long-term vision? And when we do come to think about that exit, we don't have to clean up a lot of mess.
It's exactly that last point, I would say. First of all, of course, every business is different. And so going into a business, you're going to have different plans, different ideas. Some founders are going in to just build a great business and become as wealthy as they can. Others are, want to have a 10-year project that they could sell down the line. And some companies, that are just spun up to be sold immediately.
What do you think of that? Building a company to sell it?
I don't think it's a problem with it if you know what you're doing, right? I think if someone's building a company to sell it, I have a friend who I grew up with in the U.S., and he basically, for his living, has what we call a foundry, and he's a healthcare-minded individual, and he knows the space better than pretty much anyone I've ever met. He actually worked in the White House and developed some policy around healthcare, and he knows the problems in the healthcare industry, and he's spinning up ideas. He has ideas of all the different startups that he thinks that needs to happen, and he has investors who are going to give him that blank check. He's going to hire the CEO and pretty much spin up the business from the beginning and sell it off, and because that's what he knows how to do. And selling it off means selling a product or idea to larger companies or other areas. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Now, if I'm a first-time founder and I'm going to build a business to sell it, I need to have a plan. I need to know what I'm getting involved with. And I think that's what your question is. How early do you need to think about this stuff? Well, you need to know why you're building your business. You can't just think, I'm going to build a business to become wealthy. Well, there's different ways to become wealthy because you could grow your business and hold on to it forever and you'll become wealthy as a business owner, but there's certain life sacrifices you might have to make to do that. At any given point, you might want to say, is it more worthwhile for me personally to continue growing this business or to sell it? Because it's worth something X today. And maybe the market's really hot right now and I could sell this for a premium. Those are all things that I think a good founder should consider. Now, obviously, founders with their businesses could also see it as almost a child-parent relationship. And, you don't want to mess with that. And every person's going to be different.
Okay, I see that. And in terms of taking steps, I'm not planning on selling the business, but I know that it's an option down the line. I'm setting up a business now in 2023. What practical steps would you give to founders, entrepreneurs, etc.? Or I've set up a business in the last 6 months. What would you say? Make sure from now, good best practices. That doesn't make sense. Good, but the best practices include do these 3 things, which will make it easier when we eventually come to want to sell the business. So, I'm putting you on the spot there.
It's great. Like if I could get a soundbite that says, the 3 things to do if you want to sell your business in the future.
That'd be perfect.
That'd be great. Maybe give me a second if I could figure that out. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it. In the meantime, whilst he's thinking about that, I want to remind you that you can follow, subscribe, and get Acumen wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as on YouTube if you'd like us in full video mode. Just search for Acumen with Dror Wayne. This is the podcast where we talk about leadership, business, and marketing. And we are sharing Israeli thought leadership with the world and trying to provide education and inspiration for young entrepreneurs and new founders or people who are going into business here in Israel. You ready?
I just made up a hot list, but here are the 3 things that I came up with at the top of my mind that all businesses should have if they want to sell down the line. One is, and the first is, good data. They make sure the quality of their data is accurate. That means coming from the books, coming from their ERP system, it's coming from their HR system, it's coming from their data, the CRM. And we want to make sure that all those pieces of data are able to get consolidated into a single report or model, and that those things are consistent. You'll be shocked how many companies that we see that will have inconsistent data depending on which data source you have. Single source of truth, as early as you can, will save you tons of headache down the line. Second thing, it was a good data room. making sure that all your documents are organized from the get-go. It'll save you lots of headache down the line. And the third is strategy. You need to have a business strategy. And what I mean by strategy is, how do I get from where I am today to what I said before, margins with a moat? And now that's what strategy is. And it's always going to be that. The plans is how that actually executes out on the field. And we also want to make sure that there are good plans that are guided towards that strategy. Operational excellence is not a strategy. Operational excellence is necessary for all businesses to operate effectively, but it is not a strategy.
There we have the soundbite for today. Operational excellence is not a strategy. You need more. And that's from Ariel Menche, CEO and founder of Raftel Strategy, former KPMG and WWE. You can find out more about Ariel and you can connect with him on LinkedIn as well as anywhere else in Raftel Strategy. Please tell everyone, where can they find and connect with you?
Yep. LinkedIn is the best way to reach out. Also, Ariel, Ariel, at raftelstrategy.com, RAFTEL strategy.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much for joining me today. I have so many more questions, but we're out of time. So hopefully I'll bring you back sometime.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.